Hello, my name is Andrius, and this is my very late mid-year book tag, mid-year book freakout tag, something like that. I really enjoy watching other people's videos doing this tag, and I figured I'd do mine as well. It seems like a good way to reflect on the first 7.5 now, months of reading that I've done this year. And I'll get right into it. So the first question is the best book that you've read so far. And that is Carnival. Can you see this? Yeah. Carnival by Isak Dinesen or Karen. This was excellent. If you have not read Karen Blixen, she used to be massively popular, but now I think she's mostly remembered for Out of Africa, I guess. But her short stories are still in print, and they're very good. Her short stories are her best work. And for me, she's an excellent short story writer, probably one of the best short story writers from the 20th century. And she is a writer of what Angela Carter called imitation 19th century stories. The world here is a world of noblemen and priests and peasants and that kind of thing. And this is not the modern short story where it's all about this like navel-gazing character vibe, all atmosphere and no like firm structure. Narrative was very important to Blixen, both as something to structure the stories around and thematically. There's this idea here of storytelling as a way of making meaning. The stories are a sort of often slightly fantastical, often kind of gothic, very much larger than life, fatalistic, Conte Cruel, I guess. It's an irony of fate kind of story most of the time, and they are very good. I love them. Blixen is probably my favorite writer, and Carnival was the final fiction book that I had left to read from her, and now I have, so that's a bit bittersweet. But still. Probably not her best work if you are just, if you want to give her a try. Don't start with Carnival, start with something like Seven Gothic Tales or Anecdotes of Destiny, or any of the other major short story collections, because this is a posthumous collection of her juvenilia and stories that she hadn't like properly finished, and so she hadn't included them in her major collections. But still, the standard here is very high. I really enjoyed it. Okay, then the next question was the best sequel that you've read so far. I haven't read a ton of sequels. I think this is probably the only sequel I've read this year. I haven't really been a huge series reader in recent years. But this is A Drop of Corruption by Robert Jackson Bennett. This is the second book in the... I'm not sure what the series is called. It's kind of confusing. Sometimes it's called Shadow of the Leviathan. Other times it's the Anna and Din mysteries. I don't know. Anyway, this is a series of murder mysteries in a fantasy world, where the world is a sort of kind of like a biopunk fantasy, where the magic is very organic, like a very advanced form of science, biology, chemistry, that kind of thing. And it's about some civil servants essentially in an empire that's every year is under attack by these massive creatures, like Attack on Titan style. And so far both books have been incredibly fun. So yes, favorite sequel, Drop of Corruption, and the only sequel, really, but still, a very good book. Okay, then, question number 3 was, new release. What's a new release that you haven't read yet but want to? I don't really keep track of new releases too much, but the one that comes to mind now is Nonesuch by Francis Spufford. I read about this somewhere earlier this year, the TLS maybe, and it's like a literary fantasy novel, I guess, set during the Second World War, where you follow somebody who gets involved in an occult, like spy thriller kind of thing, maybe, and there are angels and demons. It sounds crazy, and I want to check it out. I don't know if I will this year, but I'd like to. We'll see. Question number 4 is, what's your most anticipated release for the second half of the year? Well, the third book in The Shadow of the Leviathan, A Trade of Blood, by Robert Jackson Bennett. Like I said, I'm really enjoying that series. I want to keep going with it. I can't wait. Also, and this is not like a proper new release, but it's a re-release of something that's for a long time was not available in English. And this is the manga Mushishi, the new collector's edition that's being put out. Volumes 3 and 4 should be coming out this year, I think September and December. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to those. Mushishi is excellent. It's I say this jokingly, but only half jokingly, that it's the only manga really worth reading. It's a really like wonderfully tranquil, serene series in a world that's inhabited by these creatures, spirit things called mushi. It's kind of like they're kind of like insects, but not insects really. It's like this ethereal sort of life form that lives alongside people and affects people's lives in different ways. Sometimes nice ways, other times horrible ways, not out of any malice, but just because that's what they are. And the series is about accepting that and kind of living with the world as it is, living with nature as it is. And it's absolutely beautiful. The anime is also excellent. Okay, so there's other things I'm looking forward to. Then, question number 5. The biggest disappointment of the year. I have a couple. I think the absolute biggest disappointment for me was Wolfsong by T.J. Klune. This is a kind of werewolf, like a gay werewolf romance fantasy thing, I guess. And it's so bad. It's honestly so bad. I thought I was really looking forward to it. I was looking forward to getting into a fantasy series after a long time when I picked it up, and it did not do anything for me. I thought it had lots of smaller problems, and also a really massive problem that even without the smaller problems, the massive problem would still have killed the book on its own for me. So starting with the smaller problems, it's a character-focused story where the character drama is all very low-hanging fruit, or so it felt to me. Then the character focus also comes at the expense of the world, which I don't think it's an excuse for having sloppy world building. The world here it's like this hodgepodge of different fantasy elements that don't really add up to a sort of real identity. Really, the world does not feel like anything, and that's not what I'm looking for in a fantasy book, at any rate. What else? The writing was pretty annoying to me. I will say there were like these flashes of some interesting, some and obviously good technique here and there, but they never come together into a coherent style or coherent voice. They are floating in a lot of slop. There's so much clumsy repetition. Klune is also massively guilty of overusing these super dramatic line breaks, which I get. You know, lots of books do to some extent, but he absolutely overuses them in this book, and that's a huge personal pet peeve for me. So maybe it's maybe it's me to some extent, but no, did not like that. And there are just some absolutely horrible one-off lines. I still remember one of them. It was something like, "Their eyes met like a car crash." Come on, no. Just did not work for me at all. And then the massive problem, the really massive problem, was the central romantic relationship between the two main characters. Specifically, the combination there between the age gap between them and the way that those characters first meet at a fairly young age, at a very young age for one of them. I don't want to say too much about that in case anyone wants to read this book. If you don't care about spoilers, you can look up the plot. You can look up the plot. But I don't know. It was just really creepy and really uncomfortable. You can justify in all sorts of ways. Like, they are werewolves, they're not people, it's different, it's magic. But those are all excuses, and they are excuses that Klune puts in the book. But you can really world build yourself any justification for anything you want, but outside of the, outside of the universe of the book, you still have the fact that there was a real person who sat down at the desk to write this book and decided to write romantic tension between a 10-year-old and a 16-year-old. Like, yes, that's not how they see it at the time, but that's what it is. And I guess Klune can write what he wants, but I have no interest. The relationship is the whole point of the book. That romantic relationship is the core of the book. So Wolfsong was just dead on arrival. For me, there was no way. And this book has a 4.18 rating on Goodreads, which, how? I have no idea. Anyway, that was Wolfsong. Another big disappointment. Not in the sense that it's a bad book, but I had higher expectations going into it. And I didn't really get much out of it personally. And that was Gabriel García Márquez's short stories. This Penguin, I have this Penguin edition. When I read 100 Years of Solitude a few years ago, I really enjoyed parts of it. The magic, the wonder, the beautiful writing that it has at times. But I also found it very bloated, and I wanted something that's kind of like the magical parts of 100 Years, but in a tighter, more compact format. And this collection specifically, well, this is actually, I think this includes 3 of Márquez's original short story collections that he put out in Spanish. Eyes of a Blue Dog, Big Mama's Funeral, and The Incredible and Sad Tale of Innocent Erendira and Her Heartless Grandmother. So the stories from The Incredible and Sad Tale, in particular, were recommended to me in that vein as something similarly magical to 100 Years, but also tighter. And that's not what they are. Yes, they are similarly magical, but tighter? No, they are shorter, but they're not tighter. Like, for their length, the stories still feel baggy and kind of aimless, and I was left, with the same lukewarm feelings as, with 100 Years. I enjoyed, like, small parts of it, but overall did not do much for me. So not a bad book. I don't think it's a bad book. It's well written, but personally I just did not enjoy it as much. Okay, on to the next question. And that was what's your biggest surprise of the year so far? My biggest surprise, this is maybe kind of a weird answer because it's a book I actually did not finish, but The Loneliness of Sonia and Sunny by Kiran Desai. I'm sorry if I'm butchering that name. I got this book from the library and I had extremely low expectations going into it. Most contemporary literary fiction is not my kind of thing. I was expecting the usual kind of, navel-gazing, character study, kind of lifeless, contemporary lit-fic kind of thing. And the first couple of chapters at least are not at all that. They're so charming. That there was something really enchanting about that beginning, which does wane a little bit, or slow down at least, as the story goes on. And so I did end up putting it away, for now at least. I could not see myself spending, 600, 700 pages, at the time. But eventually, I think I might come back to it, when I'm specifically in the mood for a long book like that. But if, in terms of books that I actually read in full, that I actually finished, my biggest surprise is probably also the answer to the next question, which is what's your favorite new author, either a debut author or new to you. And in this case it's a new to me author, which is Mariana Enriquez, and her book Things Were Lost in the Fire. Before picking this up, I had read one of Enriquez's short stories, which was Julie, I think. I found it via LitHub. They have a list of horror short stories that you can read for free online that they put out for Halloween a couple of years ago, I think. And I found it through that list. I quite enjoyed Julie. I don't remember the details of the story now, but I remember enjoying it. So I expected to enjoy it as well, to enjoy Things Were Lost in the Fire as well, but I did not expect to enjoy it this much. These stories are so atmospheric. You have a really powerful sense of place here, of Buenos Aires, which is a part of the world I really don't know much about. I know little bits of folklore, I guess, some of which do come up in the stories here. But yeah, excellent. I finished this relatively recently, so I still haven't really gotten my thoughts in order yet. So I can't say too much about it. But yeah, these are very good horror stories. Most of them supernatural in some way. Some where the supernatural aspect is kind of ambiguous. Is it really supernatural, or is something else going on? Are the characters losing their minds? There is a bit of that. The stories here have the kind of endings that I really enjoy, open-ended endings. that leave lots of like room for the imagination. A lot of the horror is really what you don't see, what's implied, what's off screen, what's off page rather. Yeah, really good, really want to read more Mariana Enriquez. I think I'll be picking up her other short story collection, which was The Dangers of Smoking in Bed, I think. And then I know she also has a novel, Our Share of Night. So I definitely want to keep reading her. I think she's going to be one of my like go-to contemporary horror authors. Okay, for the next question. Oh, okay, then there are a couple of questions that I'm probably really going to skip, like newest fictional crush. I don't have one. I don't have a crush on anyone in the books I read this year. Newest favorite character, again, no favorite characters really. I mean, favorite relatively out of the ones I read this year, maybe Dinios Call from the Shadow of the Leviathan books, the main character there, who is who's kind of like assistant to the big genius detective. I didn't mention this when I talked about the books, but it's a kind of like if you've read any of the Nero Wolf mysteries, it's kind of like that sort of setup, where the detective never leaves the house and the assistant is the one who does the legwork. And he's a fun character, kind of very straight-laced compared to the detective who is a crazy person. And they have a nice dynamic. But is he one of my like actual favorite characters in books? No. Just, relatively, he's my favorite out of the ones I read this year, I guess. Okay, next up. What's a book that made you cry? Or the saddest book that you have read this year? No book made me cry this year, but the saddest book that I have read was probably Endling by Maria Reva. It's a bizarre book. How do I even explain that premise? It's set in Ukraine, and you have a conservationist who's trying to save dying snail species. And she's also loosely involved in the kind of international marriage industry in Ukraine to make money. She meets these two sisters who rope her into a kind of stunt that they are trying to pull against this industry. That involves kidnapping a lot of the bachelors, a lot of the men who come to Ukraine to find submissive wives. So it involves kidnapping these bachelors and taking them somewhere in the conservationists' trailer. It's a bizarre book, and it's kind of it's so playful. It's exuberant in that playfulness, really, but also it's obviously very sad and tragic at the core, because whatever they were going to do, it gets derailed when the war starts, the full-scale war starts, and as does the book itself. The book becomes very, very meta. The author becomes an increasingly visible presence in the book and becomes very personal in a way that I found really affecting and yes, really sad as well. Out of the contemporary literary fiction I've read this year so far, Endling is probably my favorite, and I do recommend it. Okay, then number 11, what's a book that made you happy? Like, happy in what way? Just, I was happy to read it? I mean, I'm happy to read a good book. So, again, The Shadow of the Leviathan, Carnival, by Karen Blixen. But if it's like a book that made me feel like positive feelings, then maybe Days at the Morisaki Bookshop and More Days at the Morisaki Bookshop by Satoshi Yagisawa. They're very simple books, there's not much to them, but they are affecting and they are cozy. And it's a very sort of... It's the kind of book that you read for the vibes, just to relax. And in that sense, they make me happy, I guess. So, yeah, that's my answer. Okay, a favorite book to film adaptation that you saw this year? Again, like favorite relatively, out of the ones I saw, or in general? I don't have any adaptations I saw that are new favorite movies. But if it's favorite relatively, then probably like Project Hail Mary. I don't know how good it is as an adaptation because I've not read the book, but I like the movie. It's the kind of like hopeful, positive sci-fi that I enjoy, and not, you know, like dour, like Interstellar or something like that. Maybe also the Stalls of Barchester, the 1971 BBC, I think, made this film adaptation of an M.R. James short story, The Stalls of Barchester Cathedral. Again, I don't know how good it is as an adaptation because I've not read the story, even though I have a collection, like a complete collection of M.R. James somewhere on my horror shelf up here. But yeah, it was a very well done short movie, I think. Some very creepy shots as well. With a hand, if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. Okay. Favorite video you have made so far this year? This is only my third video on this channel. I don't think this applies to me. The most beautiful book that you have bought so far this year? I haven't bought any like super beautiful books this year. No like very fancy editions or anything like that. But out of the ones I bought, then probably the Mushishi volumes that they have put out so far, volume 1 and 2. Let me just show you. So this is volume 2. It's a very nice hardback. And obviously, like, the art by Yuki Urushibara is really nice as well. Yeah. I mean, look at this. So pretty. And this is volume 1. Yeah, not like, you know, massively fancy books, but they are pretty books. Okay. And the last question, books that you need to read by the end of the year. Need? No, but want to? Yes. I have a bunch. There is Our Haunted Shores. This is the first Tales of the Weird anthology from the British Library that I ever got. I have a whole stack of them now up here on my horror shelf. But I got this when I was in London years ago now, and I still have not read this or any of them in full. I've read some stories here and there, but I think it's time to read this one in full, and I do really want to do it this year. Then The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. I read The Starless Sea a couple years ago and really liked that one. It's a fantasy book that really understands that fantasy is a genre of Sehnsucht, of this longing for, this beautiful longing for something else, something different, another world, an elsewhere, an otherwise, you know, of some kind. And the writing was just gorgeous as well. And I hear similar things about the Night Circus. Um, I think this is supposed to be a very autumnal book, so I keep meaning to read it in autumn. Um, Maybe this autumn, we'll see. Sorry, my camera died, so I'm finishing this on my phone again. But yeah, speaking of autumn, I have the king of autumn right here, Ray Bradbury, and the Martian Chronicles. I've read a couple of things from Bradbury now. I read Fahrenheit 451, Dandelion Wine, Something Wicked This Way Comes, The October Country. And some of those books I enjoyed more than others, but each one had something beautiful in it and something poetic in it. And he can write these gorgeous sentences. He can write atmosphere like almost nobody else that I've read so far. I've really enjoyed something in each book. In some books, I enjoyed lots of things. In others, I enjoyed a couple of things. But I really want to keep reading Bradbury. And the only one that I own that I haven't read is The Martian Chronicles. I don't know too much about it. I think it's like a cycle of short stories, so they are loosely connected in some way. They're all set on this like colony on Mars, I guess. And yeah, another book for autumn. I think Bradbury is autumn. What else? Moving on to non-fiction, actually. I have this book of literary criticism by S.L. Vonado, Haunted Presence, the numinous in Gothic fiction. This is a book that argues that the emotional effects of Gothic literature are very close to the sort of emotional tone of religious awe. There's a lot here about the sublime in horror in the Gothic, the numinous in horror in the Gothic. And that's exactly my kind of thing when I was doing my literature degrees. That's the kind of thing I was fascinated by. Like, it's exactly up my alley. So I got this book very recently, and I do really want to read it this year. See what Vonado has to say about this. And then this is kind of related to that whole sublime thing again. But I really want to start reading C.S. Lewis properly this year. Specifically, I have this, The Pilgrim's Regress, which is kind of allegory that he wrote about finding religion. And this, Surprised by Joy, which is his autobiography, memoir, that kind of thing. Again, about his sort of return to religion, I guess. But also, there's a lot there, I think, even if you're not like dogmatically Christian, which I'm not, I don't think. I've read lots of fragments of both of those books, specifically Lewis's writings on Sehnsucht, which I've already mentioned when talking about this starless sea, right? This sublime longing for something that you can't quite articulate. And for Lewis, obviously, it is a religious longing for God, for the divine, as it has been for lots of people who have engaged with it. But he writes about it so beautifully. some of those passages on Sehnsucht that he has in his afterword to the Pilgrim's Regress are just so like stunning. Really, some of the most beautiful things I've read. He describes it so well. He really understands that feeling. He understands that longing, which is something which feels like something quite meaningful to me personally as well. Even though I'm not really religious in that sense, but yeah, I think this year I really want to sit down and read not just fragments of these books, but the whole thing, really get into Lewis. And this is kind of related to my feelings about the reading that I've done this year in general. I've done a lot of reading this year. I think I've read like 25 books so far, which for a lot of you here on BookTube is going to sound funny, me calling that a lot of books. But for me, it is a lot of books. Usually I read around 30 books in a whole year. So to have read 25 books by this point is a very unusual for me. And that is partly because this year I started going to the library again, so I have very easy access to books that are currently popular, and I do have this kind of reading project of sorts going on the side where I try to read nominees or winners of literary prizes, contemporary literary prizes, just to get more of a sense of what's being published and what's being valued currently. Before I started doing this, I really was almost completely out of touch with contemporary literature, I think, aside from a handful of writers. And I read a lot of books like that, like way more contemporary fiction than I normally do. And I have the library to thank or to blame for that. But that has also made my reading this year feel kind of impersonal, a little bit empty. I don't regret it. Even if I didn't enjoy some of the books, I'm still glad I read them. But it's a different kind of glad, I'm glad I have more of an understanding of what's going on in literature. These are books that I'm interested in a reading project sort of sense, where I'm just kind of doing it to learn more about something, which is good, right? But I have been missing the feeling of reading books that are really meaningful to me personally, or books that I have been waiting a long time to read, that I have owned for a long time. And I think finally reading these two C.S. Lewis books will be a good way to start doing that. I've had these for years, and I've been coming back to passages, like I said, individual passages from these books for years. Yeah. I think my resolution for the second half of 2026 is to finish the books that I have out from the library currently. I have them stacked up here. And then try and make my reading more personal to me again. Okay, so that is my mid-year book freakout tag. If you've read any of these books, if you want to talk about them, as always, there's the comments. There's also my email in the video description. Always happy to discuss books. But for now, that's it, and until next time.